Welcome to another episode of 33 Fuel podcast. My name is Erika. I'm one of the co-founders of 33 Fuel Natural Sport Nutrition. Our guest today is the mythic Queen of Performance Cooking chef, Anna Grant.
I worked with a lot of different nutritionists over the years, and they're all very different. In theory, what is right for you and what works for an athlete theoretically, that's what they need to eat, and that's what they will eat. But that's not the case, because what most nutritionists don't take into considerations is emotion, like the emotional state of an athlete. I think anyone who has been on a diet or tried to follow a strict diet of any type, they know that if they're having a bad day, if they're feeling emotionally drained, it's extremely hard to find the motivation to keep that very strict diet.
So if you wanted to know how to fuel like a pro, well, this is a conversation with Anna Grant you don't want to miss. She is the protagonist of the Amazon Prime video Eat, Race, Win, where she reveals how she sources performance food for the Australian pro cycling team Orica Scott. She is author of 2 cookbooks, Grand Tour Cookbook and Eat, Race, Win, the Endurance Athletes Cookbook. Our mission at 33 Fuel is to give athletes the best possible tools and nutrition to be able to take their performance to the highest level. We do it by sharing conversation like this one, amazing, with Anna Grant, and also in store at 33fuel.com. So if you want to find the finest high performance natural sport nutrition, don't search further. Come at 33fuel.com. But let's jump in this conversation with Anna Grant. Welcome, Anna, to the show. I'm very excited to have you here. First question, how did you become a performance chef?
Oh, yes. So how did I become a performance chef? Sometimes I'm like, how did I do it? It's not, I didn't wake up one morning and plan it and go to school and tick that box. It sort of happened by chance, actually. I had a plan that I was going to become a big Michelin star chef with all the little detailed, beautiful dishes and so on, travel the world and work really hard in that performance environment. But basically one day, about 7 years after I started cooking, I was working at one of the best restaurants in the world called Noma. And I remember I was standing inside one of these walk-in fridges, and I was so tired. It had been such a crazy long day, and I just organized everything, and someone messed it up. And I was like, I can't do this. It's going to drive me crazy. Like, how long am I going to work like this to get to the point where I can really make a difference? And so that was kind of the trigger point for me to think, okay, I gotta think into a different world. So I decided that I actually want to go to university and study food science and nutrition. And if you've watched my show on Amazon Prime, Eat, Race, Win, you might know that I dropped out of high school, which is kind of problematic when you want to start university. So I applied for university, and I actually got in, and they said, well, you can take the university course or education if you finish A grade math and B grade chemistry. And so I thought, I can do that, no problem. And back then when I worked at that restaurant, it was impossible to study math and chemistry at the same time as working a full-time job at the best restaurant in the world. So I asked my sous chef if he knew of anyone who could give me a job where I could work very concentrated and focused and do my studies so I could start this food science and nutrition education on the Copenhagen University. And that's where it all changed, because he called me back and he said, there's a cycling team, they're looking for a chef. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting, because that's kind of what I want to do, right? It's nutrition, it's food, it's traveling, it's everything wrapped up. And so I thought, okay, this is really cool. Let's see what this is about. And And so I had actually hoped that I could finish my studies as well as working on the cycling team. Little did I know, working at a cycling team takes up like all your breathing, living hours, and it's a very compact and focused job. So um, I don't want to say unfortunately, I got kicked out of math and chemistry class, so I couldn't go to university. But that meant that I actually continued working as a chef for a cycling team. So that was the short story made long. But that's
Uh,
it's difficult to explain it in shorter terms than that. But yeah, so that completely by chance. Absolutely.
that's an incredible chance that actually a lot of athletes they are so happy about it, and also you brought really the innovation in the real sense. So, which are the major difference that you find you have found during your career between being a chef and being a performance chef?
So there's, I mean, I think the main difference as I see it is, of course, when you're a chef, no matter where you work, you want to do your best. You want to make beautiful, tasty food. But when you work in a restaurant, there's not the need for the food to do something for you other than making you feel satisfied is not there. So working with performance food and performance fuel and working with athletes in that universe, all of a sudden you have a completely different like aspect and level to cooking, because the food that you cook, it has to be able to heal and help and recover. It has to do so many things for the athlete. So you have to take, as a chef, you have to take so many things into consideration in terms of the menu structuring, because all of a sudden it's not just making something that's delicious and that looks beautiful. It has to have a purpose as well. So that's the aspect of it. I mean, and for me, that's what I love the most about cooking. I think when you are forced into like a dogma, you have to, if you have to follow certain rules, it forces you to become more creative and it forces you to think out of the box. And so that's why it's so interesting, because all of a sudden, especially when you cook for bike riders, when I used to do the Tour de France or the Giro or the Vuelta a España, I would have 9 riders eating like 30 people um, every day for a whole month. And these guys were from, they would be from different nationalities, different areas, different likings. They would have so many different opinions on food. And so that is one thing. And then touching the nutritional needs that they had, and at the same time making them happy and making them want to eat. That's sort of a puzzle, but it's, for me as a chef, that's the interesting, puzzle to solve, because if you manage to solve that, you can really make a difference in how people perform.
Absolutely, that's amazing. So, were you able to crack the code how to speak with the nutritionist? Because they speak more like a lab scientist, so they speak
Yeah.
about potassium, magnesium, iron. But you, as a chef, you have more like the ingredients, the color, the
Yeah.
texture, the smell, the presentation.
Well, I think it took a while. It definitely didn't happen overnight. And I think the the main thing, I mean, I worked with a lot of different nutritionists over the years, and they're all very different. In theory, what is right for you and what works for an athlete theoretically, that's what they need to eat and that's what they will eat. But that's not the case, because what most nutritionists don't take into considerations is emotion, like the emotional state of an athlete. I think anyone who has been on a diet or tried to follow a strict diet of any type, they know that if they're having a bad day, if they're feeling emotionally drained, it's extremely hard to find the motivation to keep that very strict diet. And so that's where the nutritionists, from the theory, they fail, because they don't take into consideration that there is a human behind the machine that bikes or runs or performs. And if you don't take into consideration the emotional state of that human, they won't eat what is perfect for them. And that's actually what I thought in the beginning when I first worked for the cycling team. I thought, these guys are pros. These guys are paid a lot of money to do what they want to do the most. They have their dream career. So of course they will eat exactly what the team wants them to eat. That's not the case, right? They're
I
like,
bet.
no way, I'm eating all those veggies and all that whole food. So it's like, I think that's the thing, you as a chef for a team, that's one thing, because I all of a sudden have to get their gain their trust, and they have to be confident in the fact that I want the best for them, but I also understand how they feel emotionally, because you can't just be strict with things. That's not going to work. If you're like, this is how it is, you eat it, they're going to, as you say, flip the bird and go to the hotel buffet and eat the fries, right? So I think, in my opinion, that's the fine balance, is definitely understanding that you deal with real humans, and even though they are the greatest athletes on the planet, they still have feelings and emotions, and they're not robots. So you have to take that into consideration, and that's where when you understand that and you find the balance between what's theoretically right for them and what do they want, when you find that, the golden circle of those two things, that's when you hit the golden spot, and they eat and they get the most nutritious stuff they want, and they also feel emotionally satisfied through the food, and that's when they perform better. Definitely,
Yeah,
that's my approach.
absolutely. And you say, food is mood. So, of course, you are
Yeah.
considering that. So, working with different nutritionists, what have you learned from them?
So I think, obviously everyone has an opinion about how things are. I am very much a person who will try things out on my own body before I test on other people. So I think it's sort of like a nutritional empathy. So you must understand how it feels to follow a strict diet, or to cut out certain food groups, or to change your diet up, and understand how it will feel. Of course everyone will feel different, but if you haven't tried it, or if you don't practice what you preach in a way, then it'll be harder for you to gain the trust and to change things. So that being said, with all the different nutritionists that I worked with, I found that Dr. Stacy Sims, who is my business partner now, was she was very, very unique from anyone else, because she had a focus on whole foods, on hydration, and not just, you know basically not just performance on the bike, but also off the bike. How does the gut feel? Do you take care of your gut? Because if you don't, one thing is what you eat in competition and when you train. If that's the right stuff, you might be fine. But if you then go home and you don't eat the right stuff, and you don't take care of your gut, then all of your efforts in the training session is basically wasted, right? Because the balance is, it has to be the full on lifestyle, and you have to constantly think about your life and your performance as a whole. And I think Dr. Stacy Sims was definitely the one who helped me sort of like tidy up the myths of do's and don'ts, because what I find in sports, in professional sports, is that there are so many contradicting um, hacks basically for an athlete to follow, right? You perform better if you eat this and this and this prior to your race, and on the bike you drink this, and then you do that. And at a certain point, there was this diet going on that all the riders wanted to do at the races, where they would eat. Oh my God, I forget what it's called now. Basically, I would call it the rehab, the retirement home diet. So nothing could have any like real dietary fibers in it. It had to be overcooked, because then you would lose a lot of weight. Um, and obviously, if you're as a bike rider, most people try to lose weight because then they can move
Yeah.
faster. The problem is with that is, if you completely deplete your system from the dietary fibers, you're also going to get stomach problems down the end, or down the road. So um, she was definitely the one who could help me understand um, why you would never do certain things, never go on a diet before an important race, right? or at an important race. Never try out new crazy foods just before you're about to do something important, because it's all about you have to understand, how does this fuel affect my body? Some people work great on chickpeas and brown rice. Some people just don't. And that's the thing. You have to test it, right? There's no one size fits all. And I think for her, that was, she had the real life approach to nutrition at the same time as being a PhD. So she also had the educational background. It was not just something. It was not like a pseudoscience. We've seen this in other people, or I believe this. This was actual, like tested science that made sense and that I could apply. So, and that gave me confidence, and that also gave the riders the trust that what I was serving and doing would benefit them. That was a long answer to your question, but that's sort of like, because what I found with a lot of, I would call them old school nutritionists, which would be the old way of eating. So white pasta, ketchup, lots of sugars, no fat, like completely fat depleted, and like moderate intake of protein. So that old school mentality was like very strict. Just eat as I say, when I say it, and then you'll perform. But the problem with these things, and what I found, I started looking into all these, all these studies that the nutritionist would tell me about. And when you base your guidance on a study that's done in the 80s on riders that had to take note themselves at the Tour de France of what they ate. I have seen a bike rider at the Tour. They're not very reliable with what they write down and what they eat and how it works. So then all of a sudden that's not very scientific. It's sort of like guessing. So then the old school way is very stubborn, and just doesn't take into consideration that there's a lot of other aspects to performance, and especially the emotional part, I think. And then of course the pseudoscience one, which is I don't even want to get into that. I think if anyone has watched Goop and Gwyneth Paltrow, they know what pseudoscience is. So it's science that has no like reality touch, but it claims to be able to help you in a lot of ways. So you find a lot of this also in the world of pro sports, and you can, as you say, cherry pick as an athlete, and that's where it becomes really dangerous when you start to cherry pick. I believe in this, I believe in that. I want to lose weight, but I also want to go healing my inner parts better. And like when you start to do that, you venture into the area of almost like dietary eating disorders, right? As a nutritionist, I think the ones that promote using real food, like thinking about your well-being and not just your performance, because you can't rule out one for the other. If you only think about performance and you don't think about what you're doing to your gut, and you're slamming gels and hydration drinks with artificial sweeteners that gives you diarrhea, then you're not going to perform better. So I am, obviously, because of a chef, I am very much a big fan of everything real food, everything cooked yourself. Know what ingredients is in what you eat. Clean eating, basically, because you can really perform on real food without all the awful additives that is in processed food.
I tell
and
you
drinks, for
what,
that matter.
I'm such a big fan, me too, of real food, and also as a 33 Fuel, we just use real food as ingredients. Just because you're right, a lot of athletes, they have the problem with the stomach. So did you experience a lot with your athletes, and have you seen a lot of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a problematic area to go into. But the problem is, obviously, all cycling teams are looking for sponsors. Once you get a sponsor that brings you a product but also brings you money, that's the one you will use. So disregardless if the products might not be very good for you, that's what you use. So that's the main problem. Also, if you as a rider not are very interested or educated within nutrition, if it says on the box that it'll give you energy and high electrolytes and so on, you believe it, so you don't take into consideration that maybe they haven't thought about fluid absorption and sugar content and all these things. So I think I just, I saw a lot of problems with the stomachs that, like, for many riders, and there's also, I should be careful what I'm saying because I know also things have changed a lot the past years. But it is, there's a lot of doctors involved, and the doctors can help you stop things and start things. So it can stop diarrhea, and if you can't go to the toilet, they can help you start it instead of thinking about the food side of things.
Yes.
And that was also an issue, I think, is definitely that, and I think it has changed a lot, but the doctors, nutritionists, and the chefs weren't really working together. The doctor will stop and start things when it's going wrong. The nutritionist demands one thing, and the chef is just trying to, like, fix things in between. So yeah, the chef can cook the most amazing food, but if they're drinking artificially sweetened hydration drinks, they're still going to have problems with their stomachs. So there is so many problems with this, but as long as there's marketing, as long as there is lots of money involved in those things, the claims for what the drinks will do will always, it'll always be there. So unless you educate yourself and you really truly understand that you got to stay away from all these buzzwords and neon colored crazy things, then until then you won't really have a fix the problem. So it's up to the individual. But one thing I found, though, is when you get one rider who understands it and who sees a difference if they change their diet and if they change the different bars they eat and the different drinks they have, if they feel a difference in the stomach, the other ones, they'll look and they'll be like, wait, what are you doing? Right? I want to do the same. So then internally that starts to change. But it's problematic. I think marketing, unfortunately, trumps science most of the time, and it's big companies that are behind most of these nutrition products. I'm going to get in so much trouble for saying all of this, but it's because I'm an advocate for this, Eat, Race, Win, which is our book, and I'm just going to do like this.
It's a beautiful book. I love it.
So with Dr. Stacy Sims, we are thinking about the athletes also outside of training. So on an everyday basis, on a mental focus basis, and also on a sleep basis, because if you don't sleep well, you're not going to recover well. And we are big advocates for clean ingredients, pardon my French, no bullshit ingredients, because you just can't perform if you don't take care of your gut and if you're not hydrated well enough, as well as eating well. So
absolutely, yeah. Absolutely, especially for the gut, it is very important to understand how to read the labels. I have this impression that athletes, they don't read the labels, or they don't know exactly how to read the labels. Yeah. I mean, this is what we experience. What is your experience?
Okay, so that is absolutely right. And I think one thing that I really want to say, and I want to emphasize so much, is especially with hydration, if a drink says 0 calorie, stay away from it.
Love
if a
it.
drink is, because here is the thing, you cannot absorb fluid if you don't have a little bit of carbohydrate in your drink. So a 0 calorie drink with electrolytes will not be absorbed in your system, which means also it's probably sweetened with artificial sweetener. And when that's the case, you will actually create a mild form of diarrhea for you. So it becomes an oxymoron. They say they hydrate, but they don't. Number one, stay away from everything 0 carb. Then the next thing is the fine balance is low carb. Low carb is the way to go if there's no artificial sweeteners in it. And how do you see that? Typically, it's a super long word with, I would say, 10 to 15 letters in it up in the top. And if it has aspartame or something like that in it, again, stay away from it. It's the fine balance. I think, and then of course, never ever believe that you can hydrate with a product like Gatorade or they're going to come after me now, but anything that's too high in sugar. If it's an energy drink, it won't hydrate you. And I think that's what most people are confused about, because as soon as the sugar content comes above 4%, even 3.6, the sugar content is too high, and then it will never hydrate you. Yes, it will give you a spike in your blood sugar and insulin production, but it just simply won't hydrate you. And that's what you're looking for mostly when you are training and when you're trying to perform. So stay away from the high sugary products. Go as natural as possible. I don't know if I can name drop. Of course, I'm sure you guys have a lot of amazing hydration products. Ours will be available in the fall.
Great.
Yeah, so I think that's definitely the one. The zero calorie drinks is just the biggest no-go. Really, truly.
Totally agree. All these sweeteners that actually are so harmful on your body, create a lot of inflammation. And there is a lot of studies behind that. You just say, what the hell? Why I can find this aspartame inside the Sport Nutrition? Where no,
it's crazy. I've seen. So one thing I've seen that I was very surprised about is these raw food bars. So anything made with dates and that is supposed to be whole foods clean. So what I've noticed on some of these brands is that they add artificial sweetener to this bar.
Why?
That to me is mind-boggling because it's so sweet to begin with. So I think typically, flip the, like if you're eating these bars, flip the bar. And if it has a weird ingredient in it that's not,
food,
date, salt, real food, stay away from it.
How difficult was it to change the food habit of the riders?
It was very difficult. So when I started, my first year was in 2011. The riders, they had the cycling union had just made a new rule called the no needle policy. So the no needle policy was that you could not poke a hole in the bike rider with a needle. So you could not give them IVs, vitamin or vitamin drops or any sort of liquids or anything like that. And all of a sudden, they had to eat everything that could give them all their vitamins and minerals because they couldn't get it injected no more. That may sound very old school, but it's not that long ago that they changed it. So that was the year that I came in, and I had a group of riders that was used to eating mountains of white pasta, white chicken and ketchup basically on a daily basis, right? That's all they ate. Maybe some white rice. Very, very simple and plain. For some reason, there was this idea that food could not taste of too much because it would give stomach problems. I don't know who came up with that one. But so when I started, the team wanted to incorporate a lot more whole foods and vegetables and everything into the diet. But when you're used to, one thing I learned is you don't change anyone's diet overnight. Simply not. So, it took a while. It took the first year for me and the riders to find where is the golden circle of the right ingredients and the flavor and the taste, and this again, the emotional state, the comfort food that they want. Where do we find that the golden circle? And that took a year back and forth to figure out. I had to understand had to learn how, how their minds worked, how what they were going through, because it's not just eating when you're a pro athlete. It's the food becomes everything to you, and it also becomes superstitious at some point, because if they get something that's right, they're like, this is the golden thing, I know I can perform. Or if they ate something specific before they won something, that will be their thing. So you're treading on very dangerous territory when you're trying to change things, and it takes slow baby steps to do it. But once you get a few riders feeling the difference, then all of a sudden you'll see the other ones following and coming, wanting to try it as well. But it was difficult. It was hard.
Supply different kind of diets requirement: vegan,
Yeah.
keto, vegetarian, paleo, gluten-free, dairy-free.
My take on that was, I would always cook everything in, like, for them I would make a little buffet. So I would never mix carbs with meat. I would keep it separate. So I would, because if you have a rider that works better with poultry and doesn't want beef, or rice, and so on and so on. So what I did was I kept the things very separate. So I would make dishes that was mainly vegetable dishes, like cooked grilled veggies and all kinds of nice vinaigrettes and so on. Same thing with the carbs, keeping that, like dense carbs, keeping that separate, and keeping the meat separate, of course, with lots of flavor and a little bit of things in it. And then the individual rider could like pick and choose. So if you want to stay gluten free, you avoid those two trays. If you want to go more like keto, you can avoid the dense carbs, and maybe you can take sweet potatoes and something. So for me, that was definitely, that worked for me, because then, because in the beginning I did like, oh, this is great, here's a stew with lots of things in it, and they freaked out. And I remember plating a plate for them with all kinds of things, and they were like, I need more potato. Or one was like, I need more meat, I can't deal with this. They were like, are you restricting me? I think the thought of them being restricted to a plate that was served for them was like, it was a panic attack full on. So I found the best way was definitely keep the things separate, so that if you follow a specific diet, it was easy for them to pick what they wanted it, and they could combine it the way that suited them, also flavor wise. Yeah.
I think that is very, very intelligent also, because as you said, mood is food. If you feel to eat something and not something else, at least you can choose it, and you feel a little bit like that you
free
can
will.
choose, as you said. Yeah, the free will, exactly. So on average, on a ground tour, the rider ingests between 5,000 to 8,000 calories per day, I think, more or less. So how do you balance the calorie in and the calorie out? Do you adjust the menu depending on the demand of the stage, or how you do it?
So as a chef, my job was to provide the foods. Each rider, of course, if you can have a tiny little skinny short rider, and then you have a huge climber, 2 meters, those two guys are going to need different fueling needs, right? They're going to need different amounts, because clearly the big guy burns a lot more than the small guy. So for me, since I never ever plated things for them, it was up to the riders to understand. Obviously, they had their meters, their watt meters, and so on. So it was up to them to understand, what is my need? How much do I mean, the guidance was there through the nutritionists if they wanted it. But most of these guys, especially if you look away from the younger, like the new riders, they understood how much they needed in order to fuel right and not gain weight. So the younger guys, that was a little more tricky, because everything was exciting. They came from a pro continental team, all of a sudden they had all this amazing food and a chef, and believe it or not, a rider can actually gain weight in a grand tour if they don't watch out what they eat. So that was more, you had to help them and say, okay, well, of course, there's carbs, there's proteins, you got to get enough so you're ready for tomorrow. And if you're just hungry for snacking, then you focus on all the veggies and all these things, because that's not going to, there's the, am I hungry because I am actually in lack of calories and nutrients, or am I hungry because I'm tired and bored? So those are the two things that you need to help them figure out. The older they get and the more pro they get, they understand that. They totally understand, because they also see quickly. They see what happens if they go down the I'm bored road, and they go into the food room. Because the thing is, as a chef, I'm not the only one providing food for them. There is something called the food room. So the soigneurs will have a room with snacks and so on. If the riders wake up in the middle of the night and they're starving, they can go and have a snack. But in that room, there's biscuits and there's sweet things and so on. And if they're having an emotional bad day, right, and they're feeling sorry for themselves, they can quickly go through a digestive pack, which is 2,500 calories extra, right, that they shouldn't have had at that point. So then that becomes a problem. So, it's a fine balance, because also then on the bike, they get their musette bags for, they bring food, and they can pack a lot of them in. They can kind of choose what they want, at least from the beginning of the race. And then the bus prior to the race, they would snack if they're nervous. So that's the gray zones where the rider has to understand to be professional. But it's difficult when you're emotionally stressed. So that's then the teammates around the athletes that has to be good at trying to restrict it, or at least keeping it away. So that's the answer is basically, I don't measure it up like that. It's up to the individual athlete to understand how much is actually needed. They have their watt meter, so they can see how much they burn. And we can easily have the conversation about how much energy is in cooked rice, and so they understand the portions. But it is difficult. I mean, it is difficult because it's a lot of guys that are constantly in different environments. And what happens is also a lot of the crew on the teams, they want to be friends with the riders. So they bring them things, candy and so on, which is a nice gesture, but not necessarily the best performance gesture to do. So I think that the riders definitely, the more they educate themselves and the more they understand, the better they perform. And I guarantee you, the second they see a difference in how, like, their weight and how their energy is, they will take it seriously. Really, they will.
The young rider arrives there, it doesn't know exactly, there is a buffet, he probably doesn't know how much, the portion, the calories.
All the different teams they have different ways to go about things, but I'm pretty sure most of the teams in the beginning of the year at the training camps, they bring all kinds of specialists in to teach them how to make sure the bike is fitted right and all these things, and training, core training, because that's also a thing they have to take care of themselves. So at the training camp, they sort of they go through most of the times like the basics of how to eat. And then that's the tricky part, because a lot of the people that actually work at the team maybe aren't, because they are old bike riders themselves, they aren't so focused on the necessity of the nutrition as they should be, because back in the days when they rode, things were different. But I also think nowadays there's a lot more information out there. That's both good and bad, especially because it's easy to fall into the trap of, if it's too good to be true and you get power, like drink this smoothie and you can ride the Tour de France, right? It doesn't really work like that. So it's difficult to speak for all of them. But I do know that there's a lot of focus on how to fuel right. And the younger riders, they look up to the big stars, the riders that perform well, and ask them questions, so they will copy what they do. So hopefully at the teams you have the stars that do the right things. Now there's Instagram and all these things, so I have a lot of young riders following me, and they buy, I'm so happy they buy my book, and they're reading up, because that's also, I have the Grand Tour cookbook, which is actually the food that's been cooked at the Tour de France, and it gives you the basics of like breakfast, snacks to bring along, how to recover, all these things. So that's a start.
Absolutely.
And then talking to the riders, the older riders as well, I think is the best, because nutritionists, yes, they're great, but in my opinion, and this is my personal opinion, so maybe not everyone will agree with this, many of the nutritionists, they just simply don't understand that life is not square, and you have to eat kale and mushrooms and this and this and this, but if they don't want to, how are you gonna, you can't force them. So that's the balance. And there's so much pressure on them to begin with, and if you add a whole other layer, which is follow the strict diet, they're gonna break. So I think, in my opinion, this is also, I know Dr. Stacy Sims is also very much about this, is it's the 80-20, you have to be able to live. So as long as the occasional thing that you give yourself, the allowance of eating something that makes you feel good, doesn't flip over and become the majority of the time, then as long as it's real food, it's okay.
Totally.
To do. Yeah.
I'm a big fan of you because
Thank you.
I love your philosophy. I love your way how you speak about real food, and sport nutrition should be real food. And I love also that you have also the blog, a lot of simple recipes there.
Yeah.
Fantastic recipes, also gluten-free, vegan. It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing.
And dairy-free, lots of dairy-free also.
And dairy-free, exactly.
Sharing is definitely the way to go, because in my opinion, what most people think is that special type diets are difficult. It's complicated to make. It doesn't taste good. You feel like you're punished when you have to eat a specific diet. And I want to show that that's not the case. And as I said earlier, I find it that when I am restricted to ingredients, I'm much more creative, and it's much more fun, because then I'm like, I'm going to show people that they can still bake an awesome cake without using flour and dairy and sugar and all these things. And I want to show people that it's not the end of the world if you can't have certain things. And the amazing thing that I found, because I've basically brought my recipe blog back to life, is I get so much feedback from all kinds of people, athletes, even the pros were baking during the COVID-19, were baking some of my cakes, and the feedback I get is it's super easy to do, and they feel great, and it's the epiphany that, whoa, it doesn't have to be difficult. And when you crack that code, you gain confidence in the kitchen. You're like, okay, I can do this. It's not, just because you can't have certain things doesn't mean that it's boring. That's what I really want to share, is that it's not difficult, and it's not the end of the world, and everyone can do it. It's just about, trying it.
Well, I have to say, I'm Italian. Food, it's in my DNA. And by the way, I'm very also excited because I saw a lot of your recipes, and a lot of things actually they are polenta, crostata, frittata. I grew up with, it's just like that is it's cool to see some Italian influence also on your dishes. All your recipes are simple to do, and they are so clean, and it's fantastic because they are so balanced with the right amount of sugar and salt. The problem is that a lot of chefs, also for athletes, then you look at their recipes, they are full of cream and
Yeah.
so many things that you say, well, I'm not sure that that's something that I would like to eat if I wanted to perform well. It's really fantastic what you are doing for the athletes and for people that they wanted to stay fit. So thanks so much for that, because
Well,
it's
thank you for that compliment. So I think if you cut out the frustrations with having to cook every single meal when you're hungry, the whole preparation, like working as a chef, thinking as a chef when you plan your meals, is the way to go. I am a big fan of cooking way too much and then using the leftovers for all kinds of other things, because I think, most people get tired of eating the same for breakfast every single day, or for lunch, or pre training snack, or whatever. So for me, it's definitely, if you're boiling rice, boil a lot, because the leftover rice can be turned into the most amazing recovery food so fast. You can make breakfast pancakes with it. There's an abundance of use for all these extra leftover things. And I think what most people have problems with is, I don't have time to cook.
Yeah.
And then because they don't have time, they're like, I'll just buy something ready-made or pour water over it. Most people do at least one or twice a week have time to, I would say, at least boil a pot of rice and chop some veggies. And if you can just, when you're preparing things, a good investment is a food processor, because anything that's cut and shredded, you don't have to chop it by hand. That's also what I write in my recipes. I'm not a posh chef that's like, you have to cut it right. If you have a food processor and you can just put it through there, it'll take you 30 seconds, and then you can make a huge pot of like bolognese or veggie stew or something like that. Freeze it. I am a big fan of making big portions and freezing it, because when you come home and you're starving, and the closest thing is calling something to be brought to your door, it's so much faster. Go to your freezer, put something in a pot, and then you have a meal. So think ahead. That's the thing. Basically, don't spend time cooking tiny portions. Cook in bulk, and then just portion it up and freeze it. And obviously, I would like to say, in my Eat, Race, Win cookbook, I do have so many recipes for, like, start with one thing and then follow the days, like, especially with the rice. There's so many leftover rice recipes, because you can have dinner in no time if you just have rice, and then always have eggs in your fridge. If you do that, you are going to be the happiest person on the planet. I promise you.
I totally agree with this, and you're absolutely right. We don't have so much time during the day to always cook fresh. So the best thing is to make a little bit more in bulk, and you can control easily what you are eating. At least you know exactly the ingredients, where they come from, how much sugar or salt you put inside, and you're sure that, because there are so many other ingredients hidden when you have already made a meal, that you really don't know exactly 100% what you are eating. Breakfast. So, which is your best performance breakfast?
I am a huge fan of anything. I'm looking up at my my cabinet here. I'm a huge fan of anything with oats. So rolled oats can they have so many. You can turn them into so many things. So I'm Scandinavian. I'm Danish. We make a lot of oatmeal. Oatmeal is maybe not for everyone, but the great thing about oatmeal or oats is that, again, most people like pancakes, right? And you want to add protein to all your meals in order to, like, stay full longer. So the great thing about oatmeal is you can make oatmeal pancakes, and it's sort of like it feels like you're having a dessert for breakfast, yet you're having an amazing source of slow release energy. So the cooked oats will give you slow release energy with a protein that keeps you full. So this is, I would say, one of the best ways to fuel before a long training session or a race is definitely anything with cooked oats. So if you like oatmeal, like most Northern European people, have your oatmeal, and when it's hot, like when you just basically have brought it to the boil and it's ready, crack an egg into it, mix it in. You'll add the protein to it, and you can add all kinds of cool fruits and something to it. And if you're not into oatmeal, still make the oatmeal, cool it down, and then crack eggs into it and make pancakes. Because that energy is absolutely, I mean, it's the best you'll get. You'll just have this long lasting,
slow release,
amazing foundation. Yeah, slow release energy. And then of course, if it's you can have it cold. So if it's really hot, you can make the bircher muesli. So soak the oats with the different seeds and so on, fruits overnight in the fridge. I'm a big fan of almond milk or oat milk. If you eat dairy, you can do yogurt or any probiotic like dairy product. That would also be great. Because that one is also amazing for both as breakfast, but also after racing as a recovery meal. So again, thinking ahead, what you eat for breakfast, if you can bring that as a recovery meal, you've basically, you've done two things at the same time. And like the bircher muesli, so the soaked muesli, you can do bulk. So you could soak it for a couple of days and you don't have to cook it. Same thing with the oats. You don't have to, once it's done, you don't have to redo it. So I think that's that's definitely, the oats I love them.
And it's so yummy, I have to say. If you add also chia seeds,
and fresh berries, and yeah, I mean, there's so many things that you can do. And that's the thing, the key is also you can tweak it to your liking. So personalize it. Yeah, it's just easy and it's fast. And so that's also the winner of that. Yeah.
I have to say, it's been such a pleasure to have you here. I just wanted to recommend everyone to watch on Amazon Prime Eat, Race and Win. It's a fantastic documentary. I really enjoyed it so much, and that it was the way actually I was introduced to you in a way, because it's like, she's so amazing. She does all this.
Thank you.
So I started to follow you from a while now. And so it's and of course your books, your cookbooks that are really an easy way how to keep your diet balanced and your performance strong. So I recommend to everyone to check it out. Actually, we will put on the show notes all the links. But if people that wanted to follow you and to find you, please give me something where they can find you.
So all my recipes are on hannahgrant.com. So that's my website. And I post all the beautiful images on Instagram under the name Daily Stews. So that's where you find all the goodies. That's on Twitter as well. So yeah, give me a follow there. And I'll also make sure that all your followers can get 20% discount on all my books if they're interested in getting them, because now you've been so kind to speak so fondly of them.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so
thanks so much for that. Because 20% is very, very generous. So thanks so much for this. And thanks so much to be a guest.
Thank you so much for having me.
Here you go. I hope you enjoyed this episode as I did while I was recording it. So if you want to know more about Hannah Grant, check out the show notes. Please get in contact with us with any kind of question. We are here for you. Don't forget to check us out at 33fuel.com. Our products are natural, tasty and powerful. So check us out at 33fuel.com. Stay tuned.